So here's a question. Is how you describe the culture of your company different than the way your employees do? And in fact, when you describe the culture of your company, is it accurate or is it aspirational? In today's episode of The Leadership Hustle, we'll talk a little bit about how important culture is and how to get it right. Hello, and welcome to The Leadership Hustle for executives whose companies are growing fast and need leaders who are ready. Today, with The Leadership Hustle, we're going to talk a little bit about this culture and how often we hear leaders talk about their culture. Mm-hmm. And, when I say, so tell me about your culture, and they point to the wall and it's got, their 5 or 8 values on it.
Yes.
And they say that's their culture. And yet, when you go and talk to the employees of their company, they say, well, yeah, we know those are the words, or we've heard those words, we talk about those words, but that really, yeah, we kind of like them, but it's like, that isn't really our culture. So we thought as we were talking about this episode that we should really talk about what culture is, and when we talk about and describe culture, how do we talk about it, and then how do we get culture right, okay? So, what are some of the things that you often hear people say when you say, tell me about your culture? Are there some specific kinds of things that you hear people say that kind of raise your red flag, I guess?
Yeah, I would say the biggest is they talk about their values, mm-hmm. and like you had already said. So sure. What you often will hear or see as well is as they're interviewing. So part of it will be, the values, and we have our values as part of the hiring process, and then we have our values as part of the annual evaluations or whatever their evaluation process is, or they're part of their one-on-ones. So I'm hearing that they're doing things, to help guide what they desire, but the question really is, but what really is your culture? Because oftentimes when they're frustrated or things are not going as planned, it's what are you saying yes and no to? Because what you're demonstrating, role modeling, approving or not approving in regards to people's behaviors is how we work together.
Right. Well, and people misunderstand that they think values are the culture. Values are simply values, things that we hold together or we believe in. And sometimes even what they call values aren't values. They're non-negotiables, or they're guiding principles, or this is how we treat each other. But it's, we just throw out this term and we lump them all in together. And then we say, well, that's our culture. And I was like, well, that's really not what culture is, right?
Yes.
So let's just talk a little bit about what culture is. And by definition, culture is how people do things within a specific group, like how they're social, how their common beliefs, how they interact with each other, who does what, how things are happening. And in our regular life, outside of business, there are all kinds of different cultures we're part of. So our family has a culture, right? And so do you have a culture where we appreciate and enjoy eating together as a family? Do we do things together because that's how we want our family culture to be? Do we celebrate things together, or is our culture perhaps maybe we have lots of independence? People come and go as they please. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of independence in how they do what they do, and so the culture is set up as that. Or we can think about our different pockets or groups of friends. There's different kinds of cultures there. Who does what? What kinds of things do we do with these kinds of friends? Who sets things up? Who organizes it? What kinds of things do we do? So when you look at it outside the business, it's really obvious to see how different those cultures can be.
Yes, and I think it's really obvious when you go to the family side of things, because oftentimes what's driving the culture in the family often will start with the grandparents and ripple down to parents.
Traditions.
Yes, it's those traditions, and so then as children are being raised, there are these expectations. There's these. This is what we do in our family. This is parents and grandparents role model it, and they also then expect it. And if a child's not meeting that expectation, then they have a conversation about it. It's not, there's a consequence.
It's like they don't fit here, so we're going to move them out of the family,
it's not
right?
that, but there is the conversation, and it's no, this is what we do as a family, and so it's something that's talked about, though. It's something that people are held accountable for.
But we don't call it culture, even though that's really
what it is. Right? Yeah, no.
And so when leaders talk to us about, we need to get our culture aligned, like, you have to decide what you want your culture to be. Because right now there is a culture.
Oh, there's always a culture.
How things happen, how people get along. Is it, we have companies where when people reply to something, they say thank you. And it's like, well, that's part of the culture. Or do we not say thank you and not replying to an email? Do we, collaborate together? Do we want a culture where we include psychological safety and people are encouraged to challenge each other with questions and debate things and get to the truth? Or is this only the manager can do that and only the manager can ask the questions?
Well, and your cultures too is how do we work together? So do we work just within our teams, or and which is going to be maybe silo-like, or do we work across the organization? And so the things that we do every day is going to either demonstrate we just really function within our teams because that's where we hang out, that's the expectation. It's not even, as you bring on a new person, it's you collaborate potentially with individuals, versus if you have a culture that you want people to be inclusive of all the other areas so that they're working together as one team, not just a department, right? Then you're going to hear them talking about, when we have a problem, you need to be thinking about who all does this impact, and let's bring those people together.
Right.
And you're setting those expectations, with individuals and how we work together.
Right. So some companies that we work with, one of their values, one of their guiding principles, one of their non-negotiables is being collaborative. And so if you have those words, so my question is, as people are being interviewed for positions, they say, well, these are our values, and so that demonstrates our culture. The question in most cases would be, is that a lie? Or is it aspirational, or is it actual? And I think that people who are, sometimes recruiting and describing who they want to bring into the company, they say, well, we have a very collaborative environment. And then if you go into the business is not very collaborative. It's a work in progress.
Or the department, because I think you can have different ways of how we get work done based off of the different areas of the business, especially as they're spread apart more,
right.
Whether it's floors, sections, buildings, states, those all are going to have a ripple effect. So you might be hiring in, and possibly the people interviewing initially, they maybe very well have a very collaborative environment, right. But the area that they're hiring for, when that person gets in there, which that was maybe something that drew them there, right? When they get over there, it's like, oh, well, you all might be collaborative, but this is not collaborative.
Right. So, as our recruiters are talking, we can say, we're working on an environment that is becoming more collaborative. We have pockets that are very, very collaborative, and we're still working across department lines. We're helping our leaders become better at that, and each individual. That's true. Like that's an
if
actual
they're working,
culture.
if they're working on it. Yes. And they aspire and they communicate it and they do things to help support and develop it, then that's true.
Right.
If they say that and then really you get in there and you don't see anything, you don't hear anything, nothing's really happening, everyone's just doing their own thing, then that's not true.
Right. Our leaders, as we talk to them, we hear them say, yes, we're hiring for cultural fit. I'm like, what does that really mean to you? Does it mean, well, they abide by our values, or in many cases, when people are hiring for culture fit, it is they think like us, they believe in the things that we believe in, they act like us, so things like, and I really struggle with that, because is that the culture you're trying to create, where everybody thinks and acts alike? Or do you want to create a culture where you contribute to the environment, where you're challenging people and you're asking good questions and you're debating and you're allowed to bring your life experiences and perspectives to the table? Or oh, we don't want to hire you because I have a different philosophy on this, or they have a different belief in this, or their experiences aren't similar to ours, and so it's going to be more challenging because we're going to have these debated conversations.
Well, I mean, with that scenario, though, either you're going to have a culture where people feel safe to speak up, and it's desired, wanted, and we do something with it, or we're going to have a culture where everyone disagrees with the leader of that department, and they make the decisions, and everyone just follows along.
Right.
So, I mean, that's part of the culture. Which is it that we have?
So let's go back to the beginning where we talked about, do the leaders describe the culture differently than the employees do? And if they're, one, do you know? So like, how would you describe the culture of the business, going out and finding out how they would describe it, and helping employees understand the culture isn't just the values, it's how does stuff get done? How do we communicate? What are the things that are friction points? When we run into a friction point, how do we deal with it?
Yes.
How do we solve that problem? But I think it's also truly important to decide what is the culture that you want, and then make sure that the behaviors that we demonstrate are supporting that, from the hiring to the day-to-day.
Yes.
So I saw a comic just recently where hiring manager or the hiring manager is talking to their employee, and they're saying to this employee, it's like, well, you lied on your resume. And the employee turns around and it's like, yeah, but you lied on your job description and your company perspective. I'm like, because what they were trying to say is this is what we are, and versus this is where we're going. And just some things like that. It's like, we don't want there to be a lie. We don't want there to be a mismention. What we want to talk about is what is. What are we doing? Where do we want to go?
Yeah, it's the culture, how we get things done. There's a bit of that accountability, again, going back to what we approve or what we say it's okay to do versus not do, right? But it is working on identifying what is that look like, and then what are we as leaders doing to demonstrate it? What are we doing to get checkpoints and really kind of, I'm gonna say, check the pulse, check the temperature, whatever that word is, to get a feel for how people are behaving. And some of it's just observing too, how people interact.
And some people just don't even know that what they're doing is taking away from the culture we're trying to build. It's just a habit of what they're doing.
Yes, a person who just likes to solve problems is not going to be a person who's collaborating.
Right.
Because they're going to go in there and like, this is how we're going to solve, this is what we're going to do, let's go.
Exactly.
And did anyone get to collaborate? No, they didn't, right? And then people just get conditioned for that to happen. So then they just all wait for that person to solve the problem.
And the scenario where we've come up with a solution and somebody doesn't agree with it, and does the person, whether it's their personality or we create the environment where it makes it easier for somebody to challenge somebody's idea, does the person react in a way where it's ugly or even just bitter beer face, as we call it, right? That it's like, how do we help the environment become more conducive to supporting the things that we're trying to accomplish in our culture? Culture has to be intentional.
Very.
If you are looking for something very specific. If you're not, just let it be. Just let it, because it exists, and it's probably very fragmented. And your company will have an outside reputation for the culture that exists. Glassdoor will show up, referrals will be talked about in that way, how many people are coming and going from the organization. All those things are demonstrating how the culture actually is.
Yes.
And some of those things are priceless, right? So yeah, lining up the culture and being intentional about it, and making sure that what we are doing as leaders is not aspirational unless we're telling people we're working on it. Yes, and you literally are.
And you are working on it. So you have to look in the mirror. And also, if you want a collaborative environment, are you collaborative?
Right.
Because you're setting the example.
Right. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Leadership Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode.